Hello, I'm Rhiannon from RT1 Home, and I'm going to share 6 different methods for adding humidity to your indoor houseplants. These methods do not include using a humidifier, and they also do not include misting. I'm going to walk through each method, what materials are needed for each method, as well as a quick demonstration on how to add humidity using these methods.
The first method I'm going to share is using a top dressing on your potted plants to help increase humidity. The materials that you'll need will be, of course, your humidity-loving plant of choice, and then for top dressing, we recommend using a natural material. Some popular material options could be pebbles, rocks, coconut coir, moss, or mulch. In our demonstration, we're using pebbles and the coconut coir. And then you'll also need any materials in case you have a cutting or something that you're going to be putting into a pot and you haven't planted it yet. So you'll need your plant pot, potting soil, and then, we like to use a soil scoop for helping to put soil into the planter, and then watering can, and then lastly, ideally, if you are monitoring your humidity, you'll be measuring it with a hygrometer. So once you have your plant of choice potted in a planter, you want to make sure that you water your plant before you add your top dressing, just because the soil is just going to naturally sink down once it's wet. And then with your top dressing of choice, you want to just add an even layer of whatever it is. We are using pebbles in this one example, and then we also do have a much more detailed video and blog that I will link in the video and in the description on how to make the coconut coir pot covers that we're using in this demonstration. So it's just something that's cut from the coconut coir sheeting. And then, as well as with the example of the pebbles, we do have a tutorial on just different ways to incorporate pebbles with plants, so in addition to using pebbles as a top dressing. So some tips for using these methods would be to make sure you use a natural material for the top dressing versus an artificial material. Just you're going to get a lot more benefits if you're using something natural. And another tip would be to make sure you spread the top dressing evenly over the soil and to leave a small space around the plant stem to help prevent any rot. Because the top dressing will help keep more moisture in, you do want to be careful when you're watering. So you want to keep your top dressing moist but avoid overwatering, also to avoid rot. The last tip would be that since this method does not create a ton of additional humidity, that you would want to potentially combine this method with other humidity increasing methods, such as grouping plants or using a greenhouse to create larger humidity levels. There are quite a few benefits of adding top dressing to your plants. The biggest probably being that it helps retain moisture in the soil by shading your soil and helping reduce the temperature below. Top dressing can help reduce and deter pests, such as fungus gnats, since it is blocking them from laying eggs. Top dressing will help prevent weeds from growing if you do have your potted plant outside. It can help provide plant support. And then top dressing can be used purely as decorative and aesthetic purposes as well. And finally, our humidity score rating for this method is low because the average humidity levels increased are only as much as 1 to 3%. Again, this is kind of a rough estimate, and there are a ton of variables that go into this, and some variables that could potentially be impacting the humidity levels for top dressing specifically would be the type of top dressing you use, the plant sizes and types, the room humidity levels, room temperature, and your water frequency. The next humidity method I'm going to share is grouping water vessels. The materials needed would be cuttings of your humidity-loving plants of choice. You're going to need some sort of vessels, which would be any container that you can use to hold water, preferably use glass. Optional add-ons would be propagation vessels. We're using our upcycled stone prop disc in this example. Also, optional add-ons would be some sort of coaster to prevent water rings on your tabletops. And then, of course, you're going to need water, and then ideally a hygrometer to monitor your humidity levels. We recommend using at least 3 water vessels for this method, ideally more, just because the more you have, the more humidity will be created. We're using about 5 in this example. So you will select your plants and your vessel, and you just want to make sure each vessel is filled with clean and room temperature water, and you will place any of your humidity loving plant cuttings in each vessel, and then you just simply want to keep them grouped close together, just not touching each other, so there'll be some airflow. And as needed, you will change out the water if the water starts to get murky. Some tips for using this method to create more humidity: you should try using a wider and more shallow water vessel to create higher humidity levels. Placing multiple water vessels, the more water around a plant will help increase humidity levels. And then if you combine the use of using water vessels with other methods like grouping plants or a cloche or a greenhouse cabinet, you will create greater humidity levels overall. Some benefits of using this method are that it's very cost effective and easy because you're very likely able to just use existing materials that you already have on hand. It can be easier to manage your plants and cuttings when they are all grouped together. And then lastly, these can be used for decorative or aesthetic purposes. Our humidity score rating for grouping water vessels is a low, just because the humidity levels increased for this method tend to be around only 5 to 10% on average. The variables impacting humidity levels for this method would be the number and size of water vessels you're using, the surface area of the water, the room size, your room humidity levels, temperature, and ventilation. The next method I'm going to share is using PEBBLE trays to increase humidity. We have a much more detailed video and blog post. I will link the video above for how to create humidity trays, and then I will also share in the description below. For this method, the materials you're going to need are your humidity loving plant of choice. You can use rocks, pebbles, gravel, whichever you prefer. A tray, we are using a porcelain tray. And of course, you'll need water. I also like to use a strainer if you need to clean off your rocks or pebbles before adding them to your tray. And then, of course, watering can is optional, and a hygrometer to monitor your humidity levels. To do this method, you will make sure that whatever your humidity loving plant of choice is already in a planter, and then you will check whatever that pot size is. So you will check whatever the diameter of that planter size is. In one of our examples, the pot is about 3 inches diameter, so you want to select a tray that is at least 2 inches wider than your plant pot. And I believe the tray is about 5 5/8, almost 6 inches, so that will be big enough to use. I just want to point out that you want to make sure you do not use a terracotta tray because it will absorb too much water and leak. you will need to use a non-porous tray, ideally something that is like a glazed ceramic or porcelain or metal or glass. And then if needed, you will rinse your pebbles or rocks in the strainer and then add your clean pebbles or rocks in a thin layer, just covering the bottom of your tray evenly. When you add the water to your pebble tray, you just want to make sure that you add a small enough just to cover the bottom of your rocks. You do not want the water level to go above the rocks unless you are trying to intentionally bottom water your plants. Then you will simply place your plant at the center of your humidity tray. Some tips for creating pebble trays and adding more humidity would be to use a much larger tray with more of a surface area to maximize water evaporation. Another tip could be to just use multiple trays in the same area with multiple plants to help increase humidity levels. And then of course you can also combine the use of humidity trays or pebble trays with other methods such as grouping plants, water vessels, or placing in a greenhouse cabinet to raise your humidity levels even higher. Benefits of using a pebble tray would be that you're creating, again, a humid microclimate for your plant, and then also that you can, if you're using a plant pot with a drainage hole, that this is a great way to also bottom water your plants. And then another benefit is for decorative or aesthetic purposes. We also rated pebble trays our humidity rating score of low. It is better than the previous two methods in general. On average, in general, the humidity levels increase approximately only 5 to 15% using this method. Variables impacting humidity levels for pebble trays are the size of the trays, the number of plants, the room size, the room humidity levels, room temperature, and ventilation. Our next humidity method we're going to share is grouping potted plants. This method is pretty straightforward. If you have cuttings or things that you need to plant, materials you would need would be your plant pots, potting soil, a soil scoop, water, of course, and then optional add-ons could be watering can or any sort of plant supports. We're using a plant arc in some of these plant examples. And then finally, your hygrometer to monitor your humidity levels. So we do recommend for this method to use at least 3 humidity-loving plants, but again, ideally more if you can. And then you also want to just be sure that all of the plants you're using for this method are healthy and pest-free. You don't really want to introduce any brand new plants that could be at risk of having, pests or sick or any ailments that you could risk exposing to a larger number of plants when they're all grouped together like this. Some tips for this method would be to group a variety of plants, and then also make sure you're grouping a few plants that are known for having higher transpiration rates, which simply means they add more moisture to the air. This tends to be plants that have bigger leaves, tend to have higher transpiration rates. Another tip would be to make sure the plants are placed close to each other to increase humidity, but leave, again, some space for airflow to help prevent any sort of mold or mildew growth or bacteria. And then finally, you can combine this method of grouping plants with other methods such as your humidity trays or water vessels to help raise humidity levels even higher. Benefits of using this method is that it's extremely easy and cost effective because you are likely just using everything that you already have on hand, and it doesn't really require any additional materials. It's also, one benefit is that it's easier to manage plants if you do have a large number of plants that are all grouped together in one area. And then this is a great benefit for, again, decorative and aesthetic purposes. We rated this with a humidity score of medium. Our humidity rating is a medium because the humidity levels for this method can increase as much as 5 to 25%. It is a big range because if you do have a high number of plants grouped together, you will see a much larger increase in the humidity levels. Some variables impacting the humidity levels for grouping your plants would be the number of plants, plant sizes and types, your room size, room humidity levels, ventilation, and temperature. Our next recommended humidity method would be using a glass cloche or cover over your houseplants. For this method, you'll need whatever your humidity loving plant of choice, and then some sort of glass cover or lid. We are using an old IKEA glass cloche that's approximately 4 inches in diameter, and you just want to make sure for whatever plant you are placing underneath that the plant pot is at least a few inches smaller in diameter and that you have enough height in your glass cover to place over your plant for it to grow. If you are using a cutting, then you'll want to make sure you have all the materials needed to plant your cutting, or if you're placing your plant in another pot that will fit under your glass cloche, you'll want to make sure that you have a plant pot that is a couple inches smaller than your cover in diameter. You're going to need your potting soil. We're using a soil scoop, water, of course, optional watering can, and then something that you probably will want to have is some sort of plant coaster or tray underneath the glass cloche, because this method will create a lot of extra moisture and you want to protect your table surface or furniture. And then finally, your hygrometer to monitor your humidity levels. And this applies only if your cloche is big enough to fit your hygrometer. For this method, once you have your selected potted humidity loving plant of choice, you're going to just simply choose the location. You're going to want to make sure you water your plant, and then again, make sure you have some sort of coaster or something to protect underneath the plant pot, and then place your glass over the plant, ensuring that there is space around the plant pot and the plant itself. One tip with this is you want to make sure you periodically open the glass cover to release some of the excess condensation, or if you need to water or check your plant. And this will also help increase air circulation to prevent mold and bacteria growth. A tip for using this method is that you do want to make sure that the glass cover or cloche is securely fitting over your plant pot. You don't want any gaps or cracks at the bottom of the opening, because then it kind of defeats the purpose of this method. You definitely want to also avoid overwatering. Just this method does tend to hold in a lot of excess moisture, so you want to prevent mold growth. And then lastly, another big tip is to probably not place this glass covered plant in direct sunlight, because with the added glass coverage, it really will increase the temperature inside the glass and it can make your plant overheat. For this method, we don't really recommend combining it with any of the other humidity methods we've recommended, such as using water vessels, creating pebble trays, or using top dressing as ways to add humidity, as it's just not really necessary, because the glass cloche or cover really creates a lot of extra humidity on its own and doesn't need to be combined. But if you do have a large enough cloche or cover, of course you can combine methods. benefits of this method is that it really does create a mini humid microclimate inside the glass. The moisture created from watering and the plant itself creates a ton of condensation that can be reabsorbed by the plant with this glass cover. I've also found that this method really requires a lot less watering of your plant. I don't need to water this nearly as often as I do my other houseplants without a cover. And then lastly, this is a great decorative or aesthetic benefit. We gave this a humidity score rating of high. The humidity levels for using this method really can increase as much as 20 to 40%. The variables impacting the humidity levels for this method would be the size of your glass cloche, the plant size and type, your room humidity levels, temperature, and the water frequency. The last humidity method that I'm going to share is using a mini greenhouse. The materials needed for the greenhouse would of course be number one, the greenhouse cabinet. We are using our DIY greenhouse cabinet that, I don't want to go too far off tangent, was kind of an ordeal to create, but I will link the video for how we made that above, and then also share the detailed blog post in the description of this video. I think the most popular and common indoor greenhouses that people are using are the IKEA cabinets, but I just also wanted to share a DIY option as well. And then for your cabinet, ideally you'll have a good amount of space in your cabinet, so you can choose your humidity loving plants of choice, as well as any corresponding pots and planters that will go with those. You could also put cuttings inside your cabinet in water vessels and glasses. I personally like to grow my seed starts using the indoor cabinet, so you would need, your seed starting materials, starter pots, seed starting mix, and then of course your seeds, whatever you're trying to grow. And then the same materials as all the previous methods. If you need to plant into new plant pots, you'll need your potting soil, your soil scoop. I also personally like to use the plant coasters and or trays. This will help protect your cabinet from excess water condensation, creating rings, damaging it. Even if it's metal, if there is a lot of water, it could lead to rust. And then of course you'll need your watering can. And then finally, I actually keep our hygrometer inside the greenhouse because it also, I guess it's technically a portable weather station that also measures the temperature and the humidity levels at the same time. So for your greenhouse, you're going to want to make sure that wherever your greenhouse is placed, it's a location in your home that is easily accessible and has relatively high visibility, because you want to make sure that you're going to check on your plants fairly often. So ours is placed in our dining room, actually tucked in the corner right by our back door exit. We have a pretty tiny home. And then once you have your location set up and your grow lights, which again, that's a whole separate video, but once your greenhouse is set up and you're moving in your humidity loving plants of choice, your cuttings or your starter pots, make sure that all of those plants and pots are watered, and then you will place them inside, of course, arrange however you'd like. Ideally, if you are doing a bunch of house plants, you want to, visually just keep your shorter plants in the front, taller plants in the back. I personally, when I do my seed starts, I have them on a separate shelf that I've made very short, so that there's enough space for the seedlings to sprout and to grow, but I only keep them in there to get started and then relocate them outdoors or out into pots. So I have my seed starting located on the top shelf, and then the taller, bigger, humidity loving houseplants on the bottom. An important tip for the greenhouse, and a lot will vary on what type of greenhouse you have and how it's set up, if it's what the closure is. My greenhouse has sliding glass doors, so sometimes I even leave these a little cracked or just open them up, leave them open just to let some air circulation in there, check on them. I have, since I've made this video, added fans, which really helps. But you want to just really ensure that there's air circulation to help prevent mold and mildew growth inside your cabinet, because it will get extremely humid and there will be a lot of condensation. And then another tip for the mini greenhouse is you want to make sure that you seal or cover any large gaps, because if there are any large gaps or openings, then it kind of defeats the purpose of the cabinet and too much heat or humidity will be lost. And then lastly, again, this is a great method for combining with some of the other humidity methods that might not create as much increases in humidity, such as your grouping your plants, your humidity trays, the water vessels. Placing these inside the greenhouse will really, really boost those humidity levels higher. Benefits of using a mini greenhouse is that you are really creating a humid microclimate indoors for your plants, which is really difficult to do, if you're living in most of our homes have, AC and heat. So it is hard to really get that humidity level needed for plants to thrive. The other big benefit is you are creating essentially a controlled environment, and it's easier to control the humidity and temperature within a smaller space compared to controlling, within your room or your home. The mini greenhouse can also be really space saving. This is a great option for, again, indoor spaces to help control your humidity level for your plants. And then I think a huge benefit is they are great for starting your seeds indoors, especially for anyone that lives somewhere that is, colder and gets, pretty cold winters. It is really great to be able to start your seeds indoors. The weather is not great outside. You can still get things started indoors. You can control the light and temperature, which is perfect for starting seeds. Another benefit is you really don't need to water your plants as much if they are inside the mini greenhouse. They, again, the plants are creating so much condensation, and then the water is able to be reabsorbed by the plants within the cabinet. And then lastly, of course, another big one, the decorative and aesthetic benefit. You can make a really amazing standout piece that you kind of have in the center of your home if you spend a lot of time keeping your greenhouse set up attractive. And so we rated the mini greenhouse with a humidity rating of high, because with this method, the humidity levels can be increased as much as 30 to 50%. The variables impacting the humidity levels of the mini greenhouse would be the ceiling and construction of the cabinet, the plant density, the cabinet humidity levels, water sources, ventilation, and temperature. And then to just jump into why we don't recommend misting as a good option to increasing humidity for your houseplants would be, one, there's just such a huge risk of mold, mildew, or fungal infections that can occur from water droplets left on your plants. And then misting tends to just really be a very temporary increase in humidity levels, which can in turn just be more stressful for your plants because you're not kind of maintaining that higher humidity level throughout the day. And then again, just with the risk of water droplets or water spots left on your leaves can cause leaf damage. If your plant is in direct sunlight, it will create essentially a sunburn on the plant leaves or stems. And then Additionally, misting is not beneficial for a lot of types of plants. So plants that have hairy or textured leaves tend to not even benefit from misting. There's a big increase in risk for overwatering with misting because you're adding excessive moisture to the soil, which can then lead to root rot. And lastly, misting can tend to encourage pest problems. Again, because of the excess moisture, some pests such as fungus gnats or spider mites really thrive in the moist environments. And then just my final thoughts on humidifiers, which again, I know so many people use humidifiers, so please don't attack me. I just personally do not use a humidifier in my home for a couple reasons. One, where I'm located, I live in North Carolina, even with the heat and AC indoors, the humidity levels in my home still are relatively high, compared to maybe if you live somewhere in the desert and it's consistently, 30% or less humidity in the air. We don't have that problem. So it's never that dry here. And then second, I, again, personally do not like the cleaning and maintenance involved with owning a humidifier. Technically, to prevent bacteria growth, you should clean your humidifier every 1 to 3 days. That again varies, but regardless, that's a lot of cleaning, and right now I just don't have time for that. So again, if you really do have low humidity in your room and you're not able to use some of the larger, like a greenhouse cabinet, some of the less invasive humidity methods, and you have a ton of plants, you might want to try a humidifier. I'm not saying don't get a humidifier. If it fits your needs, then you can 100% get a humidifier. And then one last thing that I always get comments or questions on are showering your plants. I often see people recommend to give your plants a shower in your bathroom to boost humidity levels. And that's fine and that's great, especially if you're going out of town and need to water all your plants before you leave. Overall, this is just a very temporary increase to your plant humidity levels. So yes, of course, you can shower your plants. It's a great way to water them in a big group, but really you're only going to have those increased humidity levels unless you are leaving those plants in the bathroom or in a very humid location in your home long term. So thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear if you have actually tried any of these humidity methods, or if there are any other types of humidity methods you use that work well for you. Please share them below in the comments, and please reach out with any questions in the comments as well. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, please like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.